So let's talk about Redux. We are going to create a new project. So every time you want to experiment with new libraries or new components or things like that, yeah, sometimes it's useful, right? So you experiment with a clean component, and then you have freedom to play around with it without affecting your important repos, right? So yeah, I'm just going to follow this article because I found it quite interesting. It tells you step by step how to set up Redux. So I'm going to follow the article until the end, and then I may introduce some changes on it. But as a first step, I'm just going to follow whatever the article says to do, right? So first of all, create React app. We got that already, so I'm going to skip it. But then let's create a new application, right? So I'm going to the terminal, and then I'm going to do create React app Redux. I'm going to number 2 because I created the number 1 already. So this is going to install a new project, as you already know. And now let's just open it. So let's open it. Open folder. Redux. Here we go. Right. So I got the project. This is a create React app project. You already know that. There is nothing exotic in it. Right. So in a minute, as soon as the setup finishes, I'll have my project ready, right? So then we'll start the server, and then we'll see that everything works fine. Right, here you go. It's almost ready, almost ready. That's it, right? So now hopefully, you know, Visual Studio, we got all the things in here. And now we should be able to just start the server, npm start, and we'll get a hello world application, right? So nothing very exciting, and I'm going to open it on the incognito tab to keep it easier. Here you go, create React app, right? So then what's next on the guide, right? That's it. npm start, we got that. So we're literally here, right? We've covered maybe 20% of the article already, which is a good thing. Right, so now let's start with the complex things. Now the setup. We need to install few utilities. I'm not going to talk a lot about why we need to do all these things. Please have a look to the article afterwards to read all the technical aspects of what we are doing, but essentially we need Redux, which is the core of the technology that will allow communication between components, and then Redux, which is like the binding for React, and then we need a middleware, and I'm not going to explain further what that means, but yeah, you got the article, so you can have a look afterwards, right? So let's just install this, and I will need to stop the server, or otherwise, as you already know, we can open the terminal that comes with Visual Studio. So let's just install these things, right? Right, and then what's next? Right, so we need to do a few things. You will see that essentially Redux talks about 3 types of components. We talk about actions, we talk about reducers, and we talk about stores. So these are the 3 principles that are behind Redux, right? And yeah, I'll explain them a bit. For now, I'm just going to do some copy paste. So I just want to follow what the guy is doing, and I'll try to explain a bit what's going on. So the first thing he suggests to do is to create a new folder called actions, and then a new file called simple action with this content. Okay, so let's do that. No problem at all. So let's go here. I can close the console. So I'm going to get a new folder called actions. And inside of actions, new file, simple action, I believe, .jas, simple action. Yes, correct. And then, right, so I just paste it, right? So the actions are a vital principle in Redux. So an action is an event that one component will trigger, right? So in that particular case, we're creating a new zoom it a bit. We're creating a new action called simple action. So whenever any component invokes this function, it will propagate an event with these details. That's kind of a standard in the Redux world. So every event has these 2 properties. First of all, the type of event. So we could have multiple types of events, and then the data that we are sending alongside the event. That's the first thing, the action. But then if we scroll down, we got the reducer. And again, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to explain what's that. So we got the actions. So then let's create a new folder called reducers. And then I'm going to create a new file called simplereducer.js. And then, right, here you go. So what that means? So the reducer is the hub of actions. So that means that whenever any component triggers an action, the reducer will capture the action and will decide what happens next, right? It's like the man in the middle between components. So what's happening here? I'm going to open both files in parallel. It will be probably easier to read. Look, so let me put the reducer on the left and the action on the right, like that, right? So here we say, hey, whenever any component triggers an action which type is single action, simple action, right? Then broadcast to any listener this object, right? So what is the type coming from? Here. What's the content that will be broadcasted? Whatever action.payloads states, right? So this is the hub. On the left-hand side here, we can control what happens whenever any component triggers any action, right? It's as simple as that. And then we got a weird thing called the root reducer that is like the hub of hubs. So this is where we initialize all the reducers. I'm going to keep it simple. I'm not going to explain this a lot. Just FYI, you need to create like a root reducer. If you're interested to learn more, please check the article. So root reducer.js, and in here, you see, so the only thing we're doing is combine reducers. So we bootstrap, we initialize, we load, we prepare all the reducers. As we got just one, just do it, right? So you see that the setup is maybe overcomplicated, but hey, it's what it is, right? So let's continue. Then we got the store, which is the last important principle in Redux. So we said we had actions, we had reducers, and we have the stores. So store is where the state of your application is, right? And so again, I'm going to copy it, and then I'm going to talk a bit about it. So it's expecting to have a new file called store.js, right? So let's create it. So new file, store.js. The guy is using capitals sometimes. I don't really know why. And this is the confusing bit, because for instance, he's using lowercase with some components, but then he calls them using capitals, which then it won't work. So there are some typos in the article, which doesn't help. But it's just silly things like casing, right? Apart from that, the article is really good. Cool. So we create the store. So the store is essentially a function that we bind the root reducer, which is what we literally just created, you remember, a minute ago. And then we, based on this reducer, we apply a middleware. So the middleware will be the element that will manage all the flow of the state of your app, right? Again, I'm not going to make this any longer because this is going to be quite confusing. So just have a look to the article to get more details about how this works. Fortunately, I think that should be pretty much it in terms of setup. So if we inspect a bit further on, right? Yeah, so the guy is talking about creating an initial state, which I'm not a big fan of. So yeah, I'm just going to do it. So he's saying that when you configure the global state, the only thing you need to do is to create an empty object by default. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'll pass, to be honest. I don't want to pay a lot of attention to the details because otherwise no one will understand anything, neither myself. Right? Right, so what's next? So this is already the index, right? So you already know the index. So on the index, you see, you already know this file on the left-hand side. So index is where we initialize our application, right? So the first thing we do is we render app.js, right? So we still have to do a few things in here. This is essentially, look at the difference. So we need to somehow tell that the app component, which we already have, will have access to the store that we have created. So in other words, we are enabling interoperability across our components setup, right? So I'm just going to copy and paste it. But essentially, yeah, it's exactly the same thing we got. So the only difference is, you see, this is capital. So we configure the store. So we are passing a store, which is where all the data is, to the application, right? Kind of. And what's next? So based on that, look, that the next step is on app.js, right? Which is something we're already familiar with. So what do we need to do here? Right, again, let me copy it and I'll explain a bit about this. Because there are a few steps we need to do here. So app.js will be the first component that will interact with the store. So if we go to app.js, I'm going to open it on the right hand side. Here you go. Oops. Did I copy it? Hello? Yeah, okay, cool. Anyway, cool. So that's pretty much the same component we got before. If you can see on the right hand side, right? That's the same component. The only difference is, instead of exporting the app, we need to do this thing, right? So we need to call a function on React Redux, and whenever we call the function, that function returns another function. Do you remember function carrying, right? Higher order functions, a function that returns a function. So this function returns another function, and we pass as the argument to the second function the application. So that's the way we initialize our application, right? Right. So the boring part should be pretty much done. So now let's start with the interesting bit. So let me tell you what we want to do. So on the app component, we want to have a button. So whenever we click on the button, we want to dispatch an action, and we want to listen for the response of this action, right? So as we want to dispatch an action, the first thing we need to do is to import the action that we created. I'm not sure if you remember, that was pretty much the first thing we did. So let me show again, simple action, you see? So we have one single action, simple action, right? So I want to import this component into the right-hand side. So to do that, right, we import the simple action in here, right? And then what's next? The next thing, and this is where things start getting complicated, is at the moment, so the application, even though it's connected to Redux, is not able to dispatch any event and is not able to listen for any event that anyone else is broadcasting. So how can we solve that? To solve that, we need to do this weird thing. So we need to, first of all, create a function that will transform any data dispatched by someone else. It will transform it into, it will move it into the state of the component. And that's the first thing. But then the second thing is we need to create another function to actually do on the other way around. If we want to send events, we need to do that. If we want to receive events, we need to do that, right? So now we have two functions, but we are not using them yet, right? We just declared two functions, right? So now what we need to do is we need to pass these functions to the connect method. So connect method receives two functions. This is complicated, but has some logic behind. Why? Because we are telling, hey, this is my application, right? And then I want to be able to send events to other components, but also I want to listen for changes from other components, right? Yeah, so that's pretty much it. Now let's add the button, right? And I mean, this will get slightly better, not much better, but just slightly better. Right. So I'm going to replace let me add some formatting. So I'm going to replace the paragraph at the bottom. Let's set the button, test Redux action. Again, I'm just following the guide for now. So the guy is just creating a new method inside of the app component, simple action. So he'll probably just bind it. You see, on click, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so let's just do it. You see? So we got a button. When you click on the button, look, it will call this method. And that's an interesting bit, because look at what's going on here. Let's see if it works, and then I'll explain it then afterwards, right? And then he's telling, hey, to see what happened, add some code at the bottom of your component, right? Let's see what the props are. So let's have a look to the example. Back to the browser, still working, which is a good thing, so no typos or anything like that. So look, at the moment, yeah, so props, the props we receive, that's interesting. The props we receive is something called simple reducer. Why? Because we have a reducer called simple reducer. That's it. And then, look, simple reducer is an empty object. But my expectation is, as soon as I click on the button, the empty object should be replaced by this object. Let's see if that's the case. Exactly, right? And let me recap on this. So refresh. Simple reducer is an empty object. Then I click on the button, and then I got that. Why? Now is where things start making sense a bit. So when you click on the button, simple action, we call this method on the class. That's something we already know, right? But then look at what we are doing. We can call this simple action. Why? Where is simple action coming from, right? It's weird because we are not passing any props called single action. But this is because of that. Look at these three lines. We're telling, hey, this is important. So please offer to this component, to the app, a new props called simple action. And what will happen when the user triggers this action? Then we'll dispatch an action. We'll dispatch this. So then, as we're dispatching an action, the reducer will say, hey, someone has dispatched an action. What do I need to do? And then, which is the action? Simple action. Okay, fair enough. Then dispatch this object. Right? Because of that, as the app component is dispatching action, but is also listening, because of that, it's listening, right? So that means that whenever anyone else dispatches an action, even if it's the component itself who is dispatching an action, this function will be executed. And this function is essentially creating a new prop in the component called simple reducer. And what's the value of simple reducer? This object.
So it renders itself.
Yes, correct. It renders itself, exactly, right? So let's have a look again. You see? So if we change that, if instead of action.payload, I displayed hello, as soon as I click on the button, it displays hello, right? Why result? Because it's what we declare here, right? So again, I'm going to repeat it once again, and if you don't fully grasp it, which is normal because this is complicated, have a look to the video. So we click on the button, and then we call simple action. Why simple action is a valid prop? Because we have mapped it here. So in here we told, hey, create a new prop on the app component called simple action. So whenever the user triggers this simple action function, then dispatch an action. Which is the action? This is the action, right? It will send this object to the reducer, and then the reducer will receive this object, right, which is the action, and then you say, okay, what's the type? Is it simple action? Yes, it's simple action, definitely, no problem. Then broadcast to any subscriber, yes, send this object. So then, as the app component is also subscribed to the this reducer, it will be notified, hey, someone has updated the data model. Because of that, render will be executed again, and because render will be executed again, it will have a new property called simple reducer, and the value of the property will be whatever this function returns. As simple as that, or as not simple as that, right? So this is the basics of Redux. Now I would like to do another example, because this example is a little bit artificial. It's really good because the setup, which is the most boring part, is quite clean and easy to grasp. But the power of Redux is probably not fully described. So I would like to change the example a bit. So I'm going to create a login component. So let's do that. So I'm going to create new folder, login, and I'm going to create a new file called login.js. Where should I put the CSS? You should know that already. Yes, correct. Alongside, right? Login.css, because that will help to encapsulate our CSS components. So on the login, I'm going to create a React component, right? So how can we do that? So to create a React component, the only thing we need to do is import React from React, and then export default function login, and then return. So let's create div class name equals login, and then this is the login page, right? So then we go to the css.login. So we're going to show a prompt, a pop-up in the middle of the screen, right? So to do that, let's just do let's prototype a bit this. So we can do width 50%, height 50%, left 25%, top 25%. So that should be aligned in the middle with position absolute. But that means that then on that should be it, right? So then the only thing we need to do, we need to import the CSS, right? So import login.css, and then on the app we need to import the login. So here let's do import login from login/login. I just want to see if I can display a login component. So let's put it anywhere in the middle of the screen. It shouldn't matter too much because it's going to be position absolute. So let's see if that makes any difference. Yes, I need to also put some background, right? Otherwise we're going to see nothing. Background, yellow. Right. You see? Assume that this is the login pop-up. So, but we don't want that. We want to show that pop-up when you click on the button, right? So to do that, I'm going to change the action and the reducer. So I don't want to have something called simple action because that means nothing. So I'm going to create two events. Well, I'm going to create one event for now. It's going to be, I'm going to call it show login, because from my user point of view that makes sense, right? So the ID will be show login, and the payload will be is login visible true. So by doing that, I want to change. I don't care about simple action anymore. So I'm going to call it. This is still called simple action. I'm going to leave it the name like that, but you know that we should probably rename the file as well. But let's keep it simple, right? So I got show login. So then I want to call show login whenever I click on the button. So instead of simple action, right, I'm renaming it. Simple action. Okay. So you see what I've done, right? So I renamed the method to show login. So then it calls show login, which invokes an action called show login, which will create an action call, which will dispatch an action with type show login, right? Also on the reducer, I also I need to change that, right? Something like that. Let's see if that makes any sense. So I don't get any error on the console. That's the first thing you should check, right? And now obviously I cannot see the button because it's underneath, right, of the app component. So it's on top. So I'm going just for now to hide it. We'll see how to show it, but for now, let's hide it. Correct. So now I got my button here. That's good. You see? So now I click on the button, and the data model looks closer to what I want. Simple reducer result is login visible true, right? So that's the data that the app will send to any subscriber. So then you can imagine what's the next step, right? So on the login, we want to listen for events for other components trying to show the login. So we don't care who wants to show the login. If any component dispatches an action to show the login, we are going to show the login, right? So then pretty much we need to do the same thing we did here, right? So let me do some copy pasting. So connect. So we're going to enable login to work with Redux. So that means that then we need to do all these things. Probably we don't even care about the dispatch, but we may care afterwards. But let's leave it like that, right? Again, don't try to make the perfect solution in the first iteration, because you will probably fail, right? So even if you do at the beginning something slightly dirty, that's fine. You'll improve it bit by bit, right? So we need to import the connect thingy. Right, so we got connect. Is there anything else? No, that should be it, right? I guess that should be it. So now what I'm going to do is, how can we do that? Yes, I'm going to, in here, I want to see if I got access, right? Instead of sending a Boolean, because Booleans cannot be rendered that easily, I'm going to say yes. Again, I'm just trying to do baby steps, because if I try to go very fast, I will fail. I may fail, of course, going very slow, but if I go faster, it's more complicated, right? Cool, so it's login visible, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So now in here, for now, as I'm not fully confident with my solution, let me move the login to the bottom. I want to see both components in parallel for a bit, because then I want to see if I have access to the reducer from the login. So the same thing. I want to see the props that the login receives to see if it makes any sense. So look, I got an error already, right? That's the first thing. Check the console. Export default. It's true. Yeah, you're completely right. Yeah. So I forgot to remove this. Right. So I create the login and then I export it. Show login is not defined. What is show login? Ah, it's here, right? Yes, correct. I mean, yeah, I'm going to leave now this object empty for now. We'll see what to do here, but I just want to get a green build. You see, now it's correct. So let's see. Right. You see, you know why this is failing. You should know that already. It's a cannot read property props of undefined. In other words, this is undefined. Why this is undefined?
Because we haven't sent any. Because it's not listening.
No. So the problem, yeah, this is a stateless component. Remember that stateless component don't have access to this. We got access to this on a stateful component when we create a component using class. But if you remember, when we just have a function, it doesn't have access to this.
It's just a method.
Correct. So then, will this work? Why? Correct. Thank you, Justin. So to make this work, remember that we need to pass the props when you declare the component, right? So let's check again. No errors, build time. Look, okay, that looks better. So I'm going to click on the button, and if my assumption is correct, both this and that should reflect a change. Look at that. That's great. Because now we have one component dispatching events and two components consuming events, right? So that's okay, because you can see already that the components are talking to each other, and in reality they are not saying any props. They are not passing props in the classic way, right? So they are completely decoupled. Right, so I want to change that yes with a Boolean, because the thing is, what I want to do Actually, can I get rid of the result? This sounds annoying. I don't know if I can do it, right? It's quite annoying to have an object called simple reducer, but then the result, I know that this is going to be the result. So can I simplify this a bit? I don't know. Let's try it, right? So yeah, in other words, I just want to return the payload, right? So having the result would make sense to ensure that you are always playing with objects. But what happens if I want to return an array? I don't know, to be honest, but let's see if it makes any difference. Yes, you see, I've simplified my object. I don't care about any property called result. Now I got props.simpleReducer.isLogInVisible. So if I got that, I'm going to do the CSS, and you will tell me how to change the component to make the example work. So I'm going to put back the top 25% so this is aligned. So look at what I'm doing. So by default, login is hidden. And now when it has the isVisible property, display block. So I'm expecting to have sometimes a new class name called isVisible. So how can we solve it now? And the class name here. Okay, you tell me. What do I do? Sorry? We want to have that.
You want to check if that payload is true or false.
Payload is true or false is visible.
Correct, but how do we do that? So the property is, if I'm correct, props dot simple reducer. Not sure if it's with capital or not. Yes, no, it's with lowercase. That's correct. Dot is login visible. I think, because that's what we declare on the action. Correct, is login visible. And this is going to be a Boolean.
So how do the curly brackets?
Curly brackets.
The class name?
Here? No. Surrounding the entire expression. Yes, that's correct, because we want to add something dynamically, we need the curly brackets. And then what? Like that?
No, before.
Before?
Do you want to join me?
Big win. How can we do the big win thingy? How can we mix strings with variables? String literals, thank you. Right? So we can do a string literal thingy. I'm going to move it to a new line for readability purposes. I don't want to get in a penalty on elegance. So then this will be dynamic, right? As it's dynamic, it's just a string literal. So I can do that, right? And then I can say, hey guy, if it's visible, then is visible. Else, empty string. I agree. That's a very elegant approach. Something like that, right? So logging will be always there, and then if the logging is visible, it will add the isVisible class, right? So let's see if that works. By default it's hidden, but now if I click on the button, boom. You see? It works. But now we got a problem. Exactly, we cannot close it, right? So what happens if we click on the button by accident, right? We need to refresh the page. That's not probably very user friendly. So let's add, this is the last thing I'm going to do today. Let's create a new event, a new action to do the same thing on the other way around. So now login will dispatch an action to close the menu, right? So to do that, you can imagine what we need to do, right? Now this is quite easy already, because that's the good thing. Once the setup of Redux is there, it's not that painful to work with. It's predictable at some extent, right? So we already have a function called showLogin. So yeah, let's create a new one called hideLogin, right? So type will be hideLogin. So then isLogin visible will be false, right? And then what happened here? So we can do that. That's correct, but Can you simplify this a bit?
You can delete the top returns.
The top return? Which one?
No, it's,
This one? Correct. Norbert is right. So here, look, this is very elegant. This is how switch case works in JavaScript. We say, hey, check the type. If the type is show login or hide login, then return the payload. Right? We don't need to repeat it. We can if you want, but it's not necessary because in the first case it will return this object. On the second case, it will return that object. Oops, sorry. So we don't need to create a new switch condition, right? So this is a way to simplify it a bit. So then, okay, we got hide login. So now you can imagine what's next, right? So we need to enable, we need to bind it. So we are going to add a new button. So let's add a button hide login, right? So how we do the on click? You should know that already. On click like that. Thank you. On click equals what? So we're going to enable, I'm going to show it to you. So we're going to pass a new props called hide login, and whenever you call hide login, it will dispatch an action called hide login. So then we need to import the hide login. The hide login action. Yeah, here we go. So I'm going to do, no, not copy paste. Let's try to do it manually. So import hide login from actions, simple action. Again, ideally, if I were you, I would create one file for this action, another file for this action instead of simple action. But I'm not going to waste our time doing this now, right? So hide login. So what do we need to do on the on click? Like that. This dot props.
Wow.
What we said before about this. Like that. That should work, right? That should be it. Just a question. Can we avoid using props all the time? Do you remember how to do object destructuring? I don't want to use props. I don't want to use it at all because it's the same thing all the time. Props dot. I'm super tired. You create a variable. No, I don't want to create a variable. Well, yes. Correct. We can destructure the props object. If you don't remember how to do object destructuring, this is on YouTube. So have a look to the video we recorded a couple of weeks ago, right? So in here, we can do that. Hopefully. So then your code becomes slightly more elegant. You see? So we are automatically taking a reference to props.simple reducer and props.hide login. So if we do that, hopefully, when we click on the button, it will dispatch the hide login button. But then, I mean, that should be it, right? We don't need to do anything on the app.
Can we have a look at simple reducer again?
Yeah, of course. Simple reducer. Yeah, it's a switch that will decide what to do whenever any component triggers any action, right? So let's see what happened. No failures on the console, which is a good starting point. And then we click, and then here you go. You see? So now the components can talk to each other.
Seems easy.
It's easy, yeah, the thing, right? So once you have the setup, which is a horrible thing, then extending this mechanism is relatively easy, right? So now you can imagine that you can create new actions to do new things, to do, I don't know, whatever you are thinking of. Show the menu, for example, would be a good example. So we could have a menu component, right? And then we could do the same thing. We could have a new action called show menu, another action called hide menu, and the menu will be listening for other components dispatching actions.
Good.
Yeah.
Can you show us the store? What the store does?
The store, yeah. So the store. The store is where the data actually is. So the store is binding the root reducer with the middleware. So what's the root reducer and what's the middleware? So the middleware, first of all, is the thingy that will look after the transformation necessary on your data model. And the root reducer is the function that will register all your reducers. So don't forget that in that particular case, we have two actions and one reducer. I think in reality, we'll have multiple actions and multiple reducers. So if I were you, what I would probably do, and again, I'm not an expert on Redux, so someone with better understanding may think differently, and that would be absolutely valid. But at this stage, based on my current know-how of Redux, so for instance, if this login, I will rename that to login actions and login reducer, right? So if we create the menu, I will create menu actions and menu reducer, right? Why? Because then it's a way to keep the semantics. Otherwise, you'll end up having 200 actions here, and this will be impossible to maintain, right? So keep it organized by topic.
It's just like the JS and CSS files.
Yep.
For a component.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, that's it. Any question?
Multiple actions on one component. Do you just add that to the map dispatch?
Yes, that's correct. So on the, we can do that if you want. Yes, let's do that. So technically speaking, you can have multiple actions dispatched from the same component. For example, let's hide the login from the app, right? So let's assume that we can do both, and to do that again, we need to change the top position to keep both buttons active. So look at what I'm doing. And then I'm adding a second button, and I'm going to call it on click. So this is show login, and this is hide login, unsurprisingly. So then this is going to call hide login. I mean, obviously you know that technically speaking, we could just do that, right? So we could make it inline. It's still readable enough, in my opinion. Right? Show login, hide login. So what else do we need to do to complete the test? Here.
Yeah, we need to change the state. No?
The state should be okay, because the only thing we want is to dispatch a new action, right? Okay. So what do we need to put here? Right, you're right. Anything else?
Again on the right.
Hide login, yeah.
Anything else?
On the right hand side as well.
Right. That's it? Are you sure? Are you 100% sure?
You have to import.
Correct. If I try that, this will fail. I'm pretty sure that if I check the console, exactly. Look, that's why it's important to have, first of all, the Create React App console, Webpack console always open, and then the dev tools as well, which I'm not doing it, but you can see the error is there, right? And also it's on the console, hopefully. Exactly, so it's very obvious, right? Now, that's one of the good things of modern development. Errors, generally speaking, the debugging errors is a simpler thing than it used to be in the past. So the only thing we need to do is just import the hide login, right? Cool. So let's show it, and then let's try to hide it. Boom. You see? And of course, login still can hide it. What happens if I click on hide when it's hidden already? Nothing. Yeah, okay. Yeah, exactly. So the state of the login says that it's visible false. If I click again, it's resetting to false, so nothing happened, right? Doesn't hurt, but nothing happened.
But it's what do we keep more false?
Yeah, exactly. Yes, it's false. It's really false. It's cool.
If you want to toggle it.
To toggle. Okay, that's a good question. That's a good question. Let's add another button.
Toggle, what does that mean?
Toggle means if it's open, let's hide it, and vice versa.
Oh, yeah.
So toggle. Right. Look at that's a really good question. That's a really good question. Let's set a new action called toggle. Right. In that particular case, I don't know if it's going to be true or false because
Because it could be either false or...
State that's still false.
yeah, I mean, yeah, that's a good thing. I don't know actually. So let's
Just
do.
to make a valuation, if it's false.
Yeah, I mean, we could do it here. We could do it here because we have access. So we could do it there. But the thing is, if we have 20 components trying to toggle the login, we don't want to have the logic in 20 times, right? So let's see if we can do it.
Can you do it in the shop?
But the thing is,
Store.
well, yes, look, I got an idea. Why don't we pass here the current state? Not sure if this will make any sense, to be absolutely frank with you. So let's try to do... so let's see if we can pass properties. So when we toggle, first of all, let's create the action, right? This is something we already know. Toggle, and then toggle all the time, right? It's the same thing all the time. Toggle, right? So I want to see if I can pass something here, which I have no idea, I'll be honest. Because if I can pass the current state, then on the reducer, or maybe even on the action, maybe here, I should be able to get that variable and then I could swap it. So let me see if that makes any sense. I have no idea, I'm being completely frank at the moment. As I have no idea, it's a good opportunity to do some debugging. So we got app.js, and then we got also the simple action, correct, simple action, yes. So I'm going to add a couple of breakpoints, right, and yes, right, so that's it. Let's see if that makes any sense. So toggle, A is not defined, it's not a good starting point, B, oh god, so yeah, this doesn't help because this is part of an inner function, so the debugger unfortunately doesn't have access, but I'm pretty sure I can add a console log. Right, let's do that. Let's see if that makes any difference. So I need to see the console at the bottom, show console drawer. Hey, look at that! That's great, right? I mean, again, I had no idea about whether that was possible, but yes, the instinction told me that we should be able to do that. As we can do that, you know how to solve the problem now. Okay, you should tell me, you should be able to solve the problem now. So what do we need to pass here?
State. Oh, new. The state of the toggle is literally false.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then in
Correct.
the
It's not
function,
really
you
visible.
can
Yeah.
change that.
Yeah, I agree on that. Still, I have some questions. I'm sure there is a better way. I hope there is a better way to do it. But as I'm not an expert on that, I'm going to take it in slow baby steps. So look at what I'm doing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do it like that because then I can pass the current value. So what is the current value? So the current value is so this.props.simple reducer.isLogInVisible. Again, I'm sure there's a better way to do it, but for now, so is login visible equals this dot props, obviously not there, right, inside of the render. So this is a boolean, true or false, hopefully. But then we can pass it here to toggle login. So then hopefully here I can receive it and I can pass it to the action. Is login visible? So then here I can receive it, is login visible, and then I can print it. Again, let's see if that works. Right. So let's pay attention to the console on the right hand side. Right, it doesn't work. It's still undefined. Why? We can have a look if it's login visible, if here it has the right value, and then we can have a look here if it dispatches the right value. Debugging, right? Right, so need parentheses, yeah, and I don't need that one, right? Correct. Okay, so let's add a couple of breakpoints. So this is wrong, but let's try to see where the problem is. Is it here? I would like to put breakpoints on the right line. Come on, Chrome, you can do it. Okay, sometimes you see I cannot add a breakpoint here, which doesn't make any sense because line 16 is perfectly valid to add a breakpoint. Anyway, line 26 is login visible. You see, that's the problem. The variable is undefined already. That's why it doesn't work, right? The variable is undefined. It shouldn't be undefined. So let's inspect props. Props, simple reducer. Right, so we got nothing. And probably we got nothing because it's the first time. So then it's just an empty object. But once we show it, look now. It becomes true. Exactly. So technically speaking,
Can you set it to 2 default?
yeah, we can
Initialize, yeah.
So, yeah, the first time is false. I'm not sure at the moment how to initialize it. It's an empty object, and I believe it's an empty object because the default is an empty object, right? So can we do that? No, sorry. Here we should do is login visible false. Maybe again, I'm not 100% sure. Look, it works. It's great, right? Yes, out of coincidence. So now it should work, right? Because we said, hey, by default, that's the state, right? Before it was an empty object. That's why it was working, because empty object is evaluated in this case as falsy.
And why do you define state still in the argument?
I don't know. Ask Redux. Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. Not sure you need that. Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm sure there's a better way to do it. I'm just trying to solve a problem that I have no idea how to solve it, right? So now it's looking visible is false. So now let's see what happened next. When I toggle, it's false. So then, right. So that's much better. Look at that. You see, it's looking visible false. So based on that, what is the console log? On the action, probably. Yes. So I can just, the payload you'll tell me, right? Is login visible is equals to what? Exclamation mark. We want to switch the condition, right? Well, let's remove the breakpoint because I'm 80% sure this will work. So, you see, I'm still wrong. So why I'm still wrong? To press what? So this is false. So it should return true. Wait a minute. You know why it doesn't work? We forgot to map the action, right? Do we need a new condition or can we do it alongside these two? Yes, because the payload is the same. We just want to return. In some cases, we may want to change the state. And that's why we may want to interact with the payload. But for that particular case, we don't care, right? So when it's toggle, then send it. Send the new value. So now I'm not 80. I'm 90% sure this will work. Here you go. Boom. See?
What's the main difference between toggle and the unclick?
Between toggle and?
Click.
toggle and click. No,
It's a click
Yeah,
is
exactly. It's doing the same action. So what is
no, I don't get that.
Maybe just on click.
On click,
Same simple.
on click, then click toggle, and toggle will switch true to false and false to true.
you basically what you did is you wired up a loop onto onClick, so whenever you click, it changes from true to
So you
false.
can just get rid of the higher than logging.
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, yeah, this is not a really good example, right? Because definitely it does.
Showing three things.
Correct. It doesn't make sense. It was just for testing purposes, but from a user experience point of view, yeah, probably now show and hide doesn't make sense, because if it's visible, show does nothing.
Yeah, but at
If
least
it's
you
hidden,
know how to do it.
no, yeah, exactly. It's just for testing purposes,
Why
just to
haven't we
see,
incorporated any of this into our app then?
because
Some of the actions we're doing are the same.
yes, but the thing is,
Well,
so that makes sense. So Redux makes sense when the complexity of the app is something important, right? I mean, look, even for this particular case, if this is my app, I mean, I done that for testing, yeah, for showcasing purposes. But in reality, we got the login here, so it would be much simpler in that particular case to keep a state with the is visible and pass a prop to the login, right? So for this level of complexity, it's kind of overwhelming. We're over-engineering, but again, in a more complex scenario, this will be useful, right? Any other question? No? Okay, great. So that's it for today. I know it was a longer session, but again, Redux is still important in the industry, so please try to repeat the example I've done. Next week, I'll do literally the same thing using Mobex, and then you will see the difference between them. Okay? Cool. Thank you,
Can I
guys.
take a picture?